Hello and welcome back to another Space Engineers mod showcase video. Today we're going to be staring at the floor because we are looking at Chillz Floor Pack. Now there's always been a problem in Space Engineers with lack of variety when it comes to the actual blocks themselves. Yes, we can colour them, and yes, when we spawn them in we get these lovely little patterns over here, but it leaves a lot to the imagination. Unlike Imperium, where we had the texture gun where we can just choose a random texture and then spray it around on the blocks, we are limited with what we can do. You can either jump through hoops using half-welded blocks and other things like that, or you can use the catwalks. But the problem with catwalks is if you were to place them like in the corridor like so, you severely limit what you can do because you cannot place lights on these walls or the ceiling now. So either you have to extend out the walkway and then place the catwalks upside down. Then you're left with the issue of, if it's a pre-built ship, are you going to be okay with just ripping a hole through it just to get a catwalk in? And then you're left with the other problem of having a hole underneath your ship, which might require some rebuilding and some restructuring, which can be a bit of an issue. Which is where the floor pack comes in, which is these lovely blocks over here. These are the blocks you get. So we get 4 different types, and we'll start off with the top row. Now these blocks are essentially the same as the regular steel blocks and heavy blocks, except they're a little bit different in cost. So for example, the chilled floor type 1 will only cost, I can't even read that, 13 steel plates and 2 construction components, but a regular steel block would cost 25 steel plates. So the first block here is the floor type 1, which is basically your plain floor. So you can just plop this down, say like that, if you wanted to have a large area covered in this type of pattern. So the next block here is the door. I'm not too sure why it's called the door, but it's just a nice little fancy block that you can place down as a corridor. And speaking of corridors, let's move across to this block over here. Now this is the straight. This is the straight one, and it does feature some lights. In fact, I'll just zoom myself out. Let's remove the HUD. And then if I was to switch us to nighttime, they do glow. So if you were going to have no ceiling lights, you will still know where you're going, especially on the corner blocks, which is quite nice. But yes, back to where I was. Let's just switch back to daytime and move across. We then have a T-junction block for if you wanted your pathway to veer off into different rooms. And then we have a corner block if you wanted to, say, attach it onto the T-junction and go somewhere else. Moving down here, we then have the heavy types. These are more akin to roads rather than pathways. So we have this block here, which is basically the main cover for the floor. And then coming across, we have the side. Now, unlike the blocks above, we don't get a little pathway. So it would be the case of building around what you've just placed down like so, which is why I've referred to them as the road. And then we have the corner block. So if you wanted to make a corner, you can do. And then the blocks below are essentially the same as the ones we just looked at. They are just the light variants with a white colouring. And there we go. It would be more like a kitchen block. So like you could have that as your road where your vehicles come in. That is for like your main ship for you to walk around. And that would be like a kitchen or a medical bay type flooring. But then we come across to this. This is a grate. Although, unfortunately, it is like the catwalk in the situation of you'll either have to build it underneath or on top. But if you build it on top, you won't be able to build anything on top of that. So this thing is basically a grate, and it leaves such a nice shadow there. Much like a prison, which is what I've built over here. This is... oh, let's just remove that. This is what you could do with it. You could build a prison to trap people in. It's rather lovely, isn't it? So yeah, so instead of using a traditional catwalk, you can use these blocks instead. Or if you really wanted to, you could use this block to build a fence around your property. Perhaps you can make a farm or something like that. If we put all the blocks together, we can get something like this. You can place objects on top of them, which is nice. So I could just place a battery in the middle there if I wanted to. Yes, you can build like a lovely center floor pattern. If I was to come down, you could then build a road, which comes from a small block all the way to like a 3 wide. And that is simply the white on the ending if you wanted to. Here is the pathway all set up. It looks nice, doesn't it? It gives that little something extra to these blocks, especially on small ships. And this is the grate if you wanted to. You could go an extra mile and just attach it underneath like that for a little bit of protection, but it's entirely up to you. Now, one thing I will point out is that it doesn't matter what color you make these blocks, they'll always be the same on top. So what I've done here is basically placed all the blocks on top of some more steel blocks. I've colored them, and as you can see from the top of it, their colors remain unchanged. And I'll just very quickly, if I was to say, take that red color, take my plain block and change that, it doesn't change. I can change this whole grid and it'll simply not change. And as these blocks are essentially the light armored blocks, it won't be a problem adding these to a already built ship. It'll just be the case of removing the blocks you don't want and plopping these in. So it'll be in the description below if you wish to download it and try it yourself. And I'll be back with another Space Engineers video sometime soon. Bye bye.